Good morning and welcome to my brief little crash course presentation on parts of speech in the English language. I want to go over parts of speech first and foremost because they are essentially the building blocks for every other concept in sentence structure that we're going to be going over here in the next couple of weeks. So every sentence that you've ever thought to yourself or used in a paper or uttered in a one-sided conversation to your cat is going to fall into one of those 10 categories of sentence structures. And in turn, each of those 10 categories is made up of different combinations of these parts of speech. So they're fairly indispensable. And if it sounds really complicated as it stands, don't fret over any of that. We'll cover it all in order. So it's nothing to stress over. Let's go ahead and get started.
Now, before we begin in earnest, I'd like to give everyone a brief overview of the lesson that we're going to be going through today. As I've already mentioned, this Parts of Speech video is going to be the first video in the online learning module that we will be participating in as a class. I'll be providing a 10 or 15 minute video on each of the topics at hand, the parts of speech, and then the 10 sentence structures, and then direct you to the online learning module for you to complete some activities online to go ahead and review that information. Once you've completed those modules, we'll go over the information in class just to solidify everybody's understanding of what we're learning. Now, as I already mentioned earlier, going over parts of speech is more than likely something that you're already familiar with. So if a lot of this information seems redundant, that's perfectly fine. Figured it would be best for us to start from the beginning, and if there's anything that we have more or less lost touch with over the last couple of years, if we've sort of been out of the grammar world, we'll sort of refresh that memory. So the first four things that we'll be going over are going to be the four parts of speech. It's going to be nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Nouns are people, places, things, ideas. Verbs are action words, and adjectives and adverbs describe nouns and verbs. So we'll go into more detail on that later. And then at the end of this video, I'm going to show you where you can go to begin the online learning modules and how, in fact, to get those started. So without dawdling around for too long, let's go ahead and jump into nouns, which are the first part of speech we'll be going over.
So a noun is most likely the most familiar part of speech for anybody that's ever studied parts of speech. Quite simply, it's a person, place, thing, or it's an idea. So if you're not already thinking about some examples, which I feel like most people do when they hear a definition, stop listening to me and go ahead and look around the room and see if you can pick out a couple of things that are nouns. I'll give you about 5 seconds. So regardless of what you looked at, chances are it is a noun. If you looked at a cat is a noun. If you looked at your hands is a noun. If you're looking at words on a screen or the pictures that I'm posting right now, those are all nouns. They're people, they're things, they're ideas, they're cats. So it's something that's pretty common and relatively easy to distinguish from other parts of speech. And there are a couple of neat things that are worth knowing about nouns. The first is that they're usually preceded by an article, so a word that either specifies how many something is or a particular object. So words like a and the, some, many, things like that are key denoters of a noun that will be following it. Other things that you really want to know is that nouns can be made plural. So we have a cat here, and then we can have cats. We can make it plural. Another very, very important aspect of nouns is that they can be made possessive. So we have the cat's fish that he's looking at. And then we can say the cat's fishes and give all of our other cats fishes of their own. So two key things about nouns: they can be made plural, and then they can be made possessive. Moving on, we'll be talking about verbs. Verbs are probably very familiar as well, and they're relatively just as easy to pinpoint. Verbs are words that show action, so knowing that, if you look around again and look at the nouns that you picked out earlier, you can kind of figure out what they're doing. The cat might be napping. Napping is a verb, it's an action. Your hands could be nervously twitching from the excitement of listening to me talk about grammar and sentence structures. So twitching and shaking and moving, those are all verbs. Looking at things, looking at nouns is a verb. You're doing something, it's an action. And they also serve a very, very important function. Whereas, as we already denoted, nouns can tell us how many something is. Verbs can show us when something is happening. So whether it's happening right now, whether it's already happened, whether it will happen. As you probably already know, this function is called verb tense. So there are a couple examples I just posted up there. You can change the verb nap to napped, and we know that it's already happened. The cat has already napped earlier in the day. Pretty sure bet that if the cat has already napped, the cat will nap again in the future. So nap turns to will nap. And then you can put napping, and that would be it's happening in the present. So nice things about verbs is they can tell us when specifically something is happening. And then verbs are going to play a very important in the rest of our learning modules and grammar units as well, because they're really the main difference between all of the sentence structures. There are 4 different types of verbs. There are be verbs, linking verbs, transitive verbs, and intransitive verbs. Don't concern yourself too much about diving into that right now, because as I said earlier on in the presentation, we'll be going over all of that in order, so it's nothing to fret over. But just kind of keep it in the back of your head that there are 4 different types of verbs and that they're the main differentiating factor in the sentence structures that we're going to be studying. The next 2 things that we'll be going over are adjectives and adverbs. And I want to talk about both of those together because, in my mind at least, they serve a relatively similar function. Basically, they just modify other words. So they augment nouns and verbs. That's what they do. They add extra information to the meanings of sentences. And they really only differ in terms of what words they describe. So adjectives describe nouns. They describe persons, people, places, things, and ideas. And adverbs just describe verbs. It's probably pretty obvious from just looking at the word adverb. So I went ahead and put up some examples here in each category to give you a general understanding. And again, a lot of this is probably very, very familiar if you've ever done parts of speech before. But just look at the nice picture of the cat and pay attention, and you'll do just fine as we move into sentence structures. So here we have black hair. Black is the adjective describing the noun, hair, on the cat. We have a sneaky cat, so we know that the cat is slinking and creeping through the snow, hunting for something to eat. And then we have the quick runner example. So the cat is a fast runner. Runner is a noun. It describes a person, a place, a thing. Really just a person or a thing, the thing being the cat. And quick describes what type of runner the cat is. So those are adjectives. They just describe nouns. Now adverbs, as we already mentioned, describe verbs. So these will describe an action. So the quick runner could be quickly running. Quickly describes running, what the cat is doing. So we could say the cat's running, and that gives us a good idea of what the cat's doing. But when we say quickly running, we have a little bit better of an idea of how we need to imagine that cat in our minds. The cat's digging furiously through the snow. So again, we could say the cat is digging, but when we think of a cat digging furiously, we imagine the snow flying out behind the cat as, it ejects it from the ground with its fast-moving arms and paws. And then determinedly exploring. We know that cat is very, very invested in finding something to trap and torture until it eats it. So that's our really brief crash course in parts of speech.
Now the next thing we'll be going over, and the next video that I will make, will be the be sentence structures, which are the first 3 sentence structures of the 10 that we'll be looking at over the course of this unit. They are all be verbs, so we went over those very briefly today, so be looking for that soon. But before that, you'll need to go online and participate in the online learning module that covers parts of speech. Read through that and do those activities. Let me show you where to go and how to do that. So what you'll want to do from here is pull up a web browser and go ahead and go to mrcsenglish.weebly.com. And that address is right there if you'd like to copy it down, but pretty easy to find. So as soon as you get to that web page, it's going to bring up something that looks like this. You'll be on the home page. And there are links to the class schedule and then some of the assignments. I'll be posting those over the course of the year. But where you really want to go first is going to be that tab all the way in the top right-hand corner there that says Grammar Modules. It's the one that I've circled here in the mostly circular motion. So if you go and click on that, it's going to bring you to another set of tabs that are divided by the 4 units that we'll have. So there's an introduction and parts of speech, then B structures, linking verb structures, and transitive verb structures. Right now, the only structures or the only module you'll be able to access is parts of speech. And as we progress, I will be putting the tabs for B structures, linking verb structures, and transitive verb structures there so we can move through those. And of course, I will leave the older ones up so we can go ahead and review. But since we just went over parts of speech, go ahead and click that tab. It takes about 20-30 minutes probably to work your way through that. There's some activities in there and a short quiz at the end that you must complete, and also a feedback box. So if there is a particular question that comes up while you're completing the module, you can go ahead and submit that, and I'll make sure to go over it next time we speak. And there's also a place where you can submit any parts of the website that are not working for you. Be as detailed as possible if there's a section that your computer is having a hard time accessing, and we'll see if we can get that fixed for you. That's about it for this first module, or this first video, and go ahead and complete that Parts of Speech module online, and I'll see you all soon.